"You're done, Caleb." 3 words, 27 winters, and apparently that was all it took to erase a lifetime. I was standing ankle-deep in gray slush outside the Hawthorne Ridge clubhouse, my plow truck still idling behind me, diesel smoke curling into the morning air, and Marla Voss was looking at me like she had just canceled a magazine subscription. Instead of firing the man who had kept her neighborhood alive through every major storm since 1998, I had spent the last 5 hours opening the main road for an ambulance, clearing hydrants for the volunteer fire department, and digging a path to Walter Briggs's garage because his wife had stopped breathing, and the paramedics needed room to carry her out. But Marla just adjusted the sleeve of her wool coat and said, "North Peak Grounds gave us a better price and a more modern service package." I stared at her for a second, waiting for the punchline, because people say stupid things when they are cold. But she wasn't joking. "A better price," I repeated. She gave me that polished little smile corporate people use when they are about to ruin somebody's life and want credit for staying professional. $6,750 for the season, she said, compared to your $9,100. The board has a responsibility to be financially disciplined. Financially disciplined. That phrase stuck in my head while the wind pushed road salt against my face. I looked past her toward the row of houses on Briar Hill, where porch lights were still glowing in the early morning. And I thought about all the people sleeping safely, because my crew had been out since midnight. Then I looked back at Marla and said, "You didn't save $2,300. You bought $2,300 worth of trouble." Her smile disappeared for half a second, then came back sharper. "Your services will no longer be needed after this storm." I climbed into my truck, shut the door, and sat there with both hands on the steering wheel while the heater rattled and my chest felt strangely hollow. I wasn't angry yet. Anger came later. In that moment, I just felt tired, like somebody had taken every Christmas Eve call, every broken hydraulic line, every frozen finger, every family dinner I had left early, and swept it all into a ditch. Mercer Winter Response had started with my grandfather, Ellis Mercer, and a 1967 International truck that had more rust than paint. My father expanded it, added 2 salt spreaders, and taught my older brother Owen and me that snow removal was never really about snow. It was about time. 10 minutes could mean a missed dialysis appointment, a kitchen fire spreading into the attic, or a heart attack becoming a funeral. Owen was supposed to take over the company after his second Army deployment, but he came home under a flag. So at 32 years old, I inherited the business, my father's debts, and a name that suddenly felt too heavy to carry. By the time Marla fired me, I was 47 and still running the company with the same 3 men who had stood beside me through the worst winters of my life. Sam Dorsey drove the lead plow and could judge ice thickness by the sound of his tires. Luis Ortega handled salt distribution like a chemist, measuring temperature, moisture, and slope instead of just dumping material everywhere. Ben Carver was our mechanic, a quiet man who could rebuild a hydraulic pump in a freezing parking lot while eating beef jerky with one hand. Our trucks were ugly, loud, and permanently stained white from salt, but they started every time because Ben made sure they did, and because we understood that pretty equipment means nothing when somebody is waiting for an ambulance. Hawthorne Ridge had 52 homes tucked into wooded hills outside Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and it had been our most personal contract for nearly 3 decades. We knew which driveways drifted shut first, which curbs froze before sunset, and which residents needed priority service. Edith Monroe, 81, left cinnamon rolls wrapped in foil on her porch for us. Raymond Cole, the volunteer fire chief, kept a radio beside his bed and called me before the county dispatch sometimes. The Yates family had lived there since the land was still an apple orchard. These people weren't account numbers to me. They were the reason I checked radar at 2 in the morning. Then Marla arrived. She bought the old Wentworth house at the top of the hill, a stone mansion with 6 fireplaces and a driveway long enough to have its own weather system. She was a regional hospital procurement director, which meant she spent her career convincing administrators that cheaper suppliers were smarter suppliers. Marla had a way of making every conversation feel like a negotiation you had already lost. Within 5 months, she joined the HOA board. Within a year, she became president. She replaced the neighborhood handyman because he didn't use digital invoices, fired the local landscaper for failing to provide quarterly performance metrics, and hired an out-of-county management company that charged twice as much to answer half as many phone calls. At the October contract meeting, she turned her attention to me, North Peak Grounds was owned by a man named Grant Keller, a 30-something contractor with spotless boots, a new pickup, and a tablet full of charts. He promised live GPS tracking, automated service updates, and state-of-the-art snow response. I promised roads that stayed open. Apparently, charts were more impressive. Edith raised her hand during the meeting and said, "Caleb's family has never left us stranded." Marla folded her hands and replied, "Loyalty is admirable, Edith, but it is not a risk management strategy." The board voted 4-3, and just like that, 27 years disappeared under fluorescent lights and bad coffee. The first real storm came in late November, 7 inches of wet snow followed by freezing rain. By 9 in the morning, North Peak had not touched the neighborhood. By noon, one truck finally arrived, driven by a kid who lowered his blade too far and scraped sparks off the asphalt. He skipped 2 side streets, buried 3 mailbox posts, and left packed snow on the steepest hill in the development. Edith called me at 2:30, embarrassed to ask for help. She had slipped on her walkway and landed hard on her shoulder. When I reached her, she was sitting on the kitchen floor with her arm pressed against her chest, trying not to cry. The hospital later confirmed a fracture. That evening, I walked the neighborhood with my phone camera, documenting everything. Untreated intersections, blocked hydrants, tire-polished ice, plow gouges deep enough to catch a bicycle wheel. Then I noticed something strange near the clubhouse. North Peak spreader had left uneven piles of pale material across the parking lot. I crouched, picked some up, and rubbed it between my fingers. It wasn't treated salt, calcium chloride, or any approved de-icer I recognized. It was coarse play sand, the cheap kind sold in plastic bags for backyard sandboxes. It added traction for about 10 minutes and melted absolutely nothing. I filled a clean sample bag, photographed the truck number, and went home to search North Peak's business records. What I found made the cold feeling in my stomach spread all the way to my hands. Grant Keller was licensed for landscaping and lawn maintenance, not commercial winter operations. No chemical handling certification, no de-icing permit, no emergency response endorsement, nothing that matched what he had promised the HOA. I called my friend Daniel Price, an attorney who had handled insurance disputes for years, and after I explained everything, he went silent. Denny said, "Caleb, if somebody gets seriously hurt on common property and the board knowingly hired an unqualified contractor, this could reach every homeowner in that development. Personal liability, canceled coverage, negligence supervision, all of it." I looked at the sample bag on my kitchen table, then at the photograph of Edith's untreated walkway, and for the first time since Marla fired me, I didn't feel defeated. I felt awake, because she thought she had replaced an old snowplow driver with a modern professional. But what she had really done was hand me the first piece of evidence that could bring her entire little empire down. The next storm arrived 3 weeks later, just before Christmas, and by then I had learned something about Marla Voss. She could look straight at a warning sign and convince herself it was applause. The county had been issuing alerts for days. Heavy snow, high winds, dangerous wind chills. The kind of forecast that makes experienced crews fuel every truck twice and sleep in their work clothes. But Marla sent the residents a cheerful email saying North Peak Grounds had confirmed full readiness and that everyone should trust the HOA's improved winter management system. Improved was doing a lot of work in that sentence. At 4 in the morning, I was sitting in my kitchen with coffee and the weather radar open when Raymond Cole called. He did not waste time with hello. "Caleb, North Peak has one truck here, and it is already stuck on Juniper Lane." I looked through the window at the snow blowing sideways beneath the streetlight and felt that old instinct rise in me, the one that says somebody's about to need help, but I forced myself to stay seated. Marla had sent me a written warning after Edith's accident, accusing me of interfering with contracted services and creating confusion among residents. Daniel had told me not to enter HOA property unless there was a direct emergency request or legal authorization. So I sat there, listening to the wind hit the siding, while people I had protected for most of my adult life disappeared beneath the snow. By 8, North Peak's second truck had failed near the entrance, its plow blade locked at an angle and one rear tire spinning uselessly against packed ice. Grant Keller stopped answering calls. By 10, the neighborhood was effectively sealed off. Then the emergencies began. Raymond's wife, Claire, needed chemotherapy at noon, but their garage door opened onto a 4-foot drift. A delivery nurse carrying oxygen tanks for Mr. Harlan on Oak Bend abandoned her car near the entrance and tried walking in until the wind knocked her down. At 11:20, George Yates collapsed with chest pain in his upstairs bedroom. The ambulance reached the bottom of Hawthorne Hill and stopped because North Peak's disabled truck was blocking the only safe turn. I heard the radio traffic through the scanner in my shop. Medics requesting alternate access, dispatch telling them no alternate route existed, Raymond shouting that he would guide them in on foot. I grabbed my coat before I even realized I had stood up. Daniel's warning was still in my head, but so was my father's voice, telling me that snow removal was about time. I called county dispatch, identified myself, explained the blocked road, and asked for authorization to assist. The dispatcher put me on hold for less than a minute, then came back and said, "Mr. Mercer, Emergency Services is requesting immediate access support." That was all I needed. Sam, Luis, and Ben were already waiting at the shop because they knew me too well. We rolled toward Hawthorne Ridge with 2 plows, a loader, and the salt truck, headlights cutting through snow so thick it looked like static on an old television. At the entrance, Marla was standing beside her BMW in a fur-trimmed coat, waving both arms like she was directing aircraft. She marched toward my truck as soon as I stopped. "You are not authorized to operate here," she yelled through the wind. I lowered the window and handed her the county dispatch number. "The ambulance behind me is the authorization. Move your car." Her face tightened. "North Peak is handling the situation." I looked past her at Grant Keller's abandoned truck sitting sideways across the road, then back at her. "Is that what handling it looks like now?" For once, Marla had nothing polished to say. We pulled North Peak's truck clear, opened the main road, and escorted the ambulance to the Yates house. George survived, but the delay had cost nearly 40 minutes. The doctor later told his family that another 10 or 15 could have changed the outcome. By sunset, we had opened the emergency lanes, cleared the fire hydrants, reached Mr. Harlan with oxygen, and dug out Raymond's driveway. Though Claire had already missed her treatment. "Rebuild, though, buddy." I documented every minute, every location, every disabled North Peak vehicle, and every request from emergency personnel. Marla watched from the window of her perfectly cleared mansion, because somehow a private contractor had reached her driveway before anyone reached the people with medical emergencies. That image stayed with me. 51 homes buried. One stone house glowing at the top of the hill like a palace above a disaster. 2 days later, Marla called an emergency board meeting and blamed the storm. She stood beneath the buzzing fluorescent lights with a presentation full of phrases like unprecedented accumulation, regional equipment strain, and temporary service interruption. Edith sat in the front row with her arm still in a sling. When Marla finished, Edith raised her good hand and said, "Honey, snow in Pennsylvania is not unprecedented. Hiring fools is." The room cracked with nervous laughter. Marla's jaw tightened, and I could see she wanted to attack Edith, but understood how it would look, so she turned toward me instead. "Mr. Mercer's unauthorized intervention created additional liability and interfered with our contractor's recovery plan." Raymond stood up so quickly his chair scraped backward. "His intervention opened the road for an ambulance. Your contractor's recovery plan was leaving town." Marla tried to regain control, tapping her pen against the table. "This emotional language is not helpful." That was when I placed a folder in front of each board member. Inside were photographs, dispatch records, copies of North Peak's licensing information, the sample analysis showing unapproved material, and written statements from the ambulance crew. I kept my boys calm because anger would have helped her. Facts were harder to dismiss. "North Peak is not certified for commercial de-icing," I said. "Their insurance application lists lawn care and seasonal landscaping, not emergency winter response. If their carrier denies coverage, every homeowner here could be exposed." Marla glanced at the first page, then closed the folder without reading further. "These documents have not been independently verified." Daniel, seated beside me, leaned forward. "They will be." He introduced himself, explained that Edith's injury claim had already triggered an insurance review, and warned that the board's knowledge of North Peak's deficiencies now existed on the official meeting record. For the first time since I had met her, Marla looked frightened, not guilty, frightened. There is a difference. Guilt makes people quieter. Fear makes them dangerous. The following week, every household received a special assessment notice. The HOA demanded $3,200 per home for enhanced winter readiness, legal expenses, and emergency vendor support. For Edith, that was nearly 4 months of Social Security after groceries and medication. For Raymond, it meant choosing between the assessment and one of Claire's treatment bills. Marla had hired the cheapest contractor in the county, endangered half the neighborhood, and decided the residents should finance the cleanup. That was when the anger stopped being mine alone. 21 homeowners met at Rosie's Grill on a Thursday evening, packed into cracked vinyl booths while sleet tapped against the windows. Edith brought a cardboard box of old HOA records her late husband had stored in their attic. Raymond brought North Peak's contract, which he had obtained from a former board secretary. Daniel brought yellow legal pads and the expression of a man who had just realized Christmas came early. The contract was worse than we imagined. North Peak guaranteed no response time, accepted no liability for weather-related damage, and charged $800 minimum for emergency callouts, even if their emergency involved its own broken equipment. More important, the original HOA charter required a resident vote for any annual service contract above $5,000. Marla had never held one. The board vote alone was not enough. Edith kept turning pages until she found another clause. No officer could receive direct or indirect financial benefit from any HOA vendor, and any contract obtained through undisclosed personal interest could be voided immediately. She looked over her glasses at me and said, "Caleb, people like Marla do not save $2,000 unless they are making money somewhere else." That sentence changed the room. Daniel asked whether anyone knew of a connection between Marla and Grant Keller. Nobody did, but Edith remembered seeing Grant at Marla's house months before the bidding meeting, long before North Peak's name had ever been announced. The next morning, Daniel searched state business filings and found a consulting company registered to Marla less than a year after she moved into Hawthorne Ridge. The company's stated purpose was vendor optimization and procurement strategy. We still needed proof of payments, but the shape of the scheme was beginning to appear. Marla must have sensed it, because her behavior changed overnight. Certified letters went out accusing residents of harassment and obstruction. A private investigator began photographing cars outside Edith's house. 2 of my commercial clients received anonymous calls claiming I had endangered residents by operating without permission during a storm. 1 client canceled before asking for my side. Another called me directly and said the woman on the phone sounded like she was reading from a legal script. I sat alone in the shop that night, staring at Owen's photograph above my desk, wondering how far I was willing to take this. I had started by wanting my name cleared. Now people's homes, savings, and safety were tied to what happened next. Part of me wanted to walk away and let Marla drown in her own decisions, but that was the easy kind of revenge, the kind that leaves innocent people in the water with her. So I called Daniel and told him to prepare everything: the insurance complaints, the charter challenge, the emergency injunction, all of it. Then, 2 mornings later, Edith called me before sunrise, her voice low and trembling. Not with fear this time, but excitement. "Caleb," she whispered, "I found the payments." And when I reached her kitchen, she had 6 years of bank records spread across the table, with Marla's consulting company receiving monthly transfers from a business tied directly to Grant Keller, starting 2 months before the board ever opened the snow contract for bids. The payments were not vague, accidental, or buried behind complicated accounting language. They were regular, predictable, and almost embarrassingly neat. $400 every month from Keller Site Solutions, a company registered to Grant's brother, and to Marla's consulting account, beginning exactly 8 weeks before North Peak submitted its bid. There were also 2 larger transfers, $2,800 after the board approved the contract and another $1,900 after Marla pushed through the special assessment. Edith tapped the pages with one bent finger and said, "She charged us for the rope, then got paid for tying the knot." Daniel photographed everything, prepared subpoenas for the original bank records, and filed an emergency petition accusing Marla of undisclosed self-dealing, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud against the residents. He also sent copies to the HOA's insurance carrier and the county investigator reviewing North Peak's licensing. By noon, Marla knew we had something, because she called an emergency board meeting for Saturday afternoon, just hours before the largest storm of the season was expected to arrive. The forecast called for nearly 3 feet of snow, 50-mile-an-hour winds, and temperatures dropping below zero overnight. Any experienced contractor would have spent Saturday checking hydraulic lines, treating fuel, staging equipment, and assigning emergency routes. Marla spent it rewriting minutes. Raymond's friend on the board quietly sent us a draft showing that she wanted retroactive authority to approve vendor consulting relationships without resident disclosure. She had even inserted language claiming the board had been aware of her professional relationship with Grant all along. That lie lasted about 40 minutes because 3 board members signed statements saying they had never heard of it. Meanwhile, I positioned my equipment just outside Hawthorne Ridge. Sam parked a lead plow at Raymond's fire station. Louis staged a salt truck behind Rosie's grill. Ben kept the loader warmed at our shop, where he paced around it like a nervous father outside a delivery room. Daniel warned me not to enter the development until North Peak failed for 6 hours or emergency services issued a direct request. I understood, but waiting was harder than working. Snow began Saturday evening. Soft at first, almost peaceful. Then the wind picked up and the whole sky turned white. By dawn, North Peak had 2 trucks inside Hawthorne Ridge. One died near the entrance when its hydraulic fluid thickened in the cold. The other made it halfway up Juniper Lane before the spreader jammed and the rear axle slid into a drainage ditch. Grant called Marla at 7:30, told her his crew was leaving for a higher-paying commercial job here Harrisburg, and then stopped answering his phone. We knew the exact time because Marla left him a voicemail from the clubhouse phone, and the recording later became evidence. She said, "Grant, you cannot abandon us now. Not after everything I did to get you this contract. People say the truth slips out under pressure." Marla practically mailed hers to the prosecutor. By 10, the main road was blocked. 2 elderly residents had run out of heating oil, and an ambulance trying to reach a woman who had fallen in her bathroom could not get past North Peak's disabled truck. At 10:17, County Dispatch called me. The operator did not need to explain. "Caleb, we are authorizing emergency access support for Hawthorne Ridge." I turned the key. The diesel engine came alive, and for the first time in months, the weight in my chest lifted. Sam's voice crackled over the radio. "About time." We entered through blowing snow with lights flashing. 2 plows in front, loader behind, salt truck last. Marla stood at the clubhouse entrance in a long coat, waving a folder over her head. "You are violating HOA authority," she shouted. I stopped beside her and lowered the window. "County Emergency Services outranks your folder." "Marla, move." She stepped closer, eyes wild now, all that polished confidence peeling away. "You think this proves something?" I looked up the hill toward her mansion. Its driveway had already been cleared by the private contractor she paid for herself, while every other family was trapped. "It proves exactly what everyone can see," I said. Then I drove past her. We pulled North Peak's first truck off the entrance road, cut a path to the ambulance, and reached the injured woman within 34 minutes. Sam opened the route to the heating oil deliveries. Louise treated the steep grades with the correct material, measured properly instead of tossed around like birdseed. Ben used the loader to free a fire engine that had slid sideways near Oak Bend. For 12 straight hours, we worked through wind that shook the mirrors and cold that turned every breath into pain. By sunset, every emergency route was open, every hydrant was accessible, and all 52 homes could be reached. Nobody died. That was the part that mattered, even if the rest felt pretty good too. Monday morning, the clubhouse was packed. 48 residents showed up, along with a local news crew, the county emergency coordinator, an insurance investigator, and 2 deputies carrying a warrant for the HOA's financial records. Marla walked to the front wearing the same expression she used when she fired me, but it no longer looked powerful. It looked rehearsed. "This weather event exceeded all reasonable service expectations," she began. Edith raised her hand, the one no longer in a sling, and said, "The storm did not put money in your consulting account, Marla." The room went completely still. Daniel placed copies of the transfers on the projector, month by month, payment by payment. The whole arrangement appeared on the wall behind Marla in numbers too simple to explain away. Grant had paid her before the bid, after the vote, and after the special assessment. Then Daniel played the voicemail. "Not after everything I did to get you this contract." Marla's own voice filled the room, and I watched her realize there was nowhere left to hide. She accused Edith of stealing records, accused me of organizing retaliation, accused the board of betraying her, but every word only made her look smaller. The county coordinator announced that North Peak had been removed from the approved contractor list and referred for fraud and licensing violations. The insurance investigator confirmed that the HOA's coverage was under review because the contractor services had been misrepresented. Then Raymond stood and read the board's unanimous vote, removing Marla as president. She turned toward me and hissed, "You did this because I fired you." I shook my head. "No, Marla, you did this because you thought saving money gave you permission to gamble with other people's lives." One of the deputies stepped forward and asked her to come with them for questioning. As she walked outside, she hit a patch of untreated ice at the bottom of the steps and landed in a snowbank, not badly hurt, just buried to the shoulders, while half the neighborhood tried very hard not to laugh. 6 months later, Edith became HOA president. Dues were reduced, the special assessment was canceled, and every large contract required a resident vote and an independent financial review. Marla eventually pleaded guilty to fraud-related charges, paid restitution, and sold the stone mansion to cover legal costs. Grant's company collapsed under lawsuits from several communities he had abandoned. Mercer, when a response, received a 5-year contract at a fair rate, and business doubled after the news story aired. I used part of that growth to create the Owen Mercer Winter Relief Fund, providing free snow removal for disabled veterans, seniors, and families dealing with medical emergencies. Every time one of our trucks clears a driveway without sending a bill, I think about my brother and my father, and I remember that the best answer to people like Marla is not becoming crueler than they are. It is proving that competence, loyalty, and decency still have value when the weather turns bad. But I still wonder about one thing. Was I right to wait for legal authorization while those families sat trapped? Or should I have ignored Marla sooner and gone in before the emergency call came? Tell me what you would have done, and whether an HOA president who risked lives to save money deserves a second chance. Then share this story with someone who believes cheap decisions never come with an expensive price.